You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and every sports fan on earth learned two things yesterday. The first is that when you have the opportunity to not have to face Aaron Judge, you don't face Aaron Judge because he can hit monstrous home runs. That's number one. Number two, these safety protocols with the bubbles and the guidelines, everything like that, they work. All you have to do is look at the numbers. The NHL administered 2,618 tests. Only 2 players tested positive out of that sample size. That is minuscule. And the NBA is even better. No one in Orlando for the NBA tested positive. It's working. And I saw a great tweet from Brian Sutterer, MD. He said that since these results are out there, any subsequent positive test result is going to be because someone was stupid. Someone went out of the bubble. Someone went out to get food when they shouldn't have, or wasn't doing what they needed to do with masks or social distancing. These bubbles work. What a great sign for sports fans. What a great sign for life in general. I mean, I don't know what more evidence you need to realize that masks and social distancing is the only way to stop the coronavirus as of right now. It seems like we're trending in the right direction when it comes to a vaccine. I'm hesitant to say the worst is over, but I think we're in a good place right now. Let's keep it up. Seriously, let's keep the positive momentum rolling. Other than that, nothing big happened in sports since I left you yesterday. So it is time for the Superfecta. It's going to get done today for the first time. And I will start with decades of dumbass decisions. We're on the 2-7 matchups now, and I actually just noticed this. Every quote-unquote favorite in the 2-15 matchups and the 7-10 matchups advanced, with the exception of Kittles over Kobe. That decision knocked off Jason Kidd as a coach. But I'll start with the Yankees. We have bullpens going up against the 2001 World Series. The Yankees, all throughout my lifetime, have had really bad relievers. I'm not saying that all of the relievers have been bad. Obviously, Rivera, Chapman, Robertson, Hughes in 09, Ottavino, Britton, Canely, Green. They've had good relievers too, but we're focusing on the bad with this. And boy oh boy, have the Yankees had some bad relievers. Luis Vizcaino, Kyle Farnsworth, Scott Proctor, Chris Britton, Tyler Clippard, Ron Villone. I mean, some of the worst pitchers you can think of. Felix Heredia, Blake Parker, Felix Rodriguez, Paul Quantrill was abysmal. If I forgot any, go back to the first round of Decades of Dumbass Decisions when I mentioned this. I think it was Thursday. Yeah, it was Thursday. And obviously, the 2001 World Series, the Yankees are the superior team. They have the entire country rooting for them. They're going up against a Diamondbacks team that had 3 great players that year. Randy Johnson, Curt Schilling, and Luis Gonzalez. The Yankees had more than 3 great players. I'll tell you that right now. And obviously, Game 7, Rivera blows it. Throws the ball away at second. Gives up the game-winning hit to Luis Gonzalez. Terrible moment, one of the worst moments in Yankees history. That's worse than bullpens. It just is. The 2001 World Series advances. I feel like when you think about those bad relievers, you also think about the good a little bit. I mean, I had a bunch of people ask me, Jacob, why did you put bullpens? You do know the Yankees had Mariano Rivera, right? It's like, yeah, I do, but look at these guys. I mean, I understood their point, but I put it there because of guys like Quantrill and Proctor, guys that Joe Torre ran into the ground. But those guys are not worse than losing the 2001 World Series. Moving on now to the Islanders. We have an incredibly hard decision. I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about this. We have John Tavares leaving versus the 2000 draft. 2 of the worst days in Islander history. On June 24th, 2000, the Islanders made 3 decisions that would cement themselves as bottom feeders, both in terms of when they were in the playoffs and when they weren't in the playoffs. They traded Roberto Luongo and Olli Jokinen for Mark Parrish and Oleg Kavasha. They picked Rick DiPietro over Danny Heatley and Marian Gaborik. And they picked Raffi Torres over Scott Hartnell. So the Islanders could have had a team that included Luongo, Jokinen, Heatley or Gaborik, and Hartnell. That core sounds pretty good to me. That core, I'm not going to say it would have won a Stanley Cup, but it would have gotten the Islanders a lot closer there than they ever got with DiPietro, Torres, Parrish, and Kavasha. Oh, God. It's just funny. You have to laugh about it to make yourself cope as an Islander fan. The other bad day, July 1st, 2018, John Tavares leaves the Islanders for the Maple Leafs. Told this story sitting at McCarran Airport waiting to board my flight back to New York. I see Tavares leaves. I let out a blood-curdling no. I see my dad, and I tell him as he's walking back with food. Really, really upsetting moment. But the Islanders haven't lost a beat since losing Tavares. Give Barry Trotz credit. And to a lesser extent, give Lamoriello credit. As much as I don't like Lamoriello, I'll give him credit for not blowing things up and actually putting together a team that somehow has made the playoffs in back-to-back years without John Tavares. Now, granted, the players that they brought in really haven't worked. Komarov hasn't been great. Hickey's been a major disappointment. Lehner's no longer here. But still, Lamoriello deserves credit for not blowing things up and actually going for this thing. So far, it's worked. Trotz deserves more credit, though, because there's no way this roster should be in the playoffs, but it is. Like I said, give Barry Trotz the bulk of the credit. There's a reason he was the Jack Adams Award winner last year. By the way, I will do NHL awards. I just want to wait until all of them come out, but it is on my radar. So like I said, Tavares leaving didn't set the Islanders back. The 2000 NHL draft and those 3 decisions that Milbury made set the Islanders back, you can make the argument, 10 to 15 years. Maybe even more. The 2000 draft is worse. Moving over to the Jets, we have 2 AFC title game losses. The 2010 AFC title game versus the 1982 AFC title game loss. 2010, they lose to the Steelers. The Steelers outplay the Jets in the first half. The Jets look terrible. To their credit, they make a game of it in the second half, but it's too little too late. In 1982, the A.J. Dewey game, he's still going. It rains like a bandit the night before. In Miami, Don Shula leaves the tarp off. It nullifies a really good Jets offense that was built around one thing and one thing only, and that is speed. When you have wet grass, you're not going to be able to run as fast. Richard Todd was abysmal. Completed less than 50% of his passes, threw for barely 100 yards, had 5 interceptions. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that. The 1982 AFC title game loss is worse just because of everything that went with it. It's almost as if God didn't want the Jets to win. That's why he sent the rain. And Shula has the presence of mind to leave the tarp off. Yet the Jets still find themselves in position to win. But Richard Todd throws a boneheaded interception to A.J. Dewey. And you know what? He still hasn't been touched by a Jet. Watch that clip. I know it's on YouTube. It's worth watching. Moving on now to the Brooklyn Nets. We have Kittles over Kobe going up against the 2009 to 2010 off seasons. John Calipari picked Kerry Kittles over Kobe Bryant, whether that's because he believed that Bryant wouldn't play in New Jersey or he thought Kittles was the better player. Still hasn't been 100% settled. I personally think it's some combination of the two. And the 2009 to 2010 off seasons featured Vince Carter and Ryan Anderson being traded to the Orlando Magic. It set up one of the worst seasons in NBA history, where the Nets went 12-70. They went 0-18 to start off the season. Lawrence Frank gets fired after losing the first 16 games. Tom Barisi comes in as interim coach. He loses the 17th straight game, which tied the record for most losses to start an NBA season. And then broke the record the next game. Kiki Vandeweghe took over right after that. I mean, it was terrible. It should have resulted in the Nets getting John Wall, but the lottery screws them over. They end up with the 3rd overall pick. They take Derek Favors, who didn't even spend a full season with the Nets before he got traded for Darren Williams. That trade worked out. I'm not upset over that, but I'd have really liked John Wall. After that, the Nets position themselves as big players in free agency. They have the billionaire owner in Prokhorov who wants to spend a bunch of money, and he wants to win a title in 5 years. They're going to move to Brooklyn soon. And instead of landing big free agents, they get Jordan Farmar, Anthony Morrow, Travis Outlaw for 5 years at $35 million. Seems like pittance now, but back then it was a lot of money. And Johan Petro. See, the thing with Kittles over Kobe is Kerry Kittles had a good Nets career. He was a good player on the 2 Nets teams that went to the NBA Finals. They would have won them with Kobe. There's no question about that. And they probably would have won more. But Kittles at least did something positive. Nothing positive came out of the 2009 offseason all the way to the 2010 offseason for the Nets. You can certainly make the argument for putting Kittles over Kobe ahead of those 12 months, but I'm going to put the 2009 to 2010 off seasons into the next round. I'm putting them into the Sweet 16. Also, there's no guarantee that Bryant would have lasted long enough with the Nets to see those 2 teams that made it to the NBA Finals. I think he would have, but it's possible that he wouldn't have. You gotta put that into consideration here, too. Like I said, this was really, really close. Alright, it's time to go Baseball Hall of Faming. The guy who I want to talk to you about is one of the most controversial Hall of Fame inductees that Cooperstown has. And that is Tommy McCarthy. He was elected into the Hall of Fame in 1946, and really from then on, it's caused a lot of debate. There are a lot of sabermetricians like Bill James and Jay Jaffe and people like that that have written a bunch of things saying why McCarthy shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. And you know what? I agree with them. I'm not gonna attack it from a sabermetric standpoint because I'm really not a big fan of sabermetrics. But I'll attack it from a logical perspective. Just go and look at his stats. How many Hall of Fame years does he have? 4? Look, he had a stretch from 1890 to 1894, with the exception of 1892, when he was one of the best outfielders in baseball. But he has really minimal bold type. He was really good for 4 out of those 5 years, but that shouldn't get you into the Hall of Fame. This guy has under 1,500 hits. 1,493 if we doubled the number of hits that he has. it still wouldn't hit 3,000. Think about that. There are very few Hall of Fame hitters that have less hits than McCarthy. Look, I understand that he revolutionized the game with the hit and run. That's an important part of baseball. You still see it. I understand that. Look, he was widely respected among his peers. I get that. But come on, look at his career stats objectively. How do you look at this guy's stats and say he's a Hall of Famer? According to Jaws, the Jaffe wins above replacement score, which is a metric used by some sabermetricians to determine whether someone should be in the Hall of Fame or not. McCarthy is the worst player in the Hall of Fame, just according to that one metric. I mean, I don't know too much about that stat, but the one thing I can tell you is that according to Jaws, players like Wally Post, Jeremy Burnett, Trot Nixon, Jermaine Dye, and Hank Bauer were all better players than McCarthy. And that's just considering right fielders. You know what? I'd have a tough time disagreeing with that. There's no way on this earth that Tommy McCarthy should be in the Hall of Fame. Not even close. Alright, it's time to bring back a segment that I haven't done in a long time. It's This Day in Sports History. On this day, in 1959, the Boston Red Sox officially desegregated themselves as Pumpsie Green became the first African American in their team's history. He pinch ran for Vic Wertz after Wertz pinch hit for Don Budden. Green wouldn't advance past first, and he would play the ninth inning at shortstop. Look, it's okay if you don't know the name Pumpsie Green. Unless you're a big baseball fan or a big Red Sox fan, you're not going to know the name. He was primarily a utility infielder, solid player, but nothing incredibly special. He is important to talk about, though, because he was the man who broke the color line for the last team to stay segregated. It took the Red Sox longer than any other MLB team to desegregate. Now, I'm sure you're asking yourself, why was that? Was it because their owner was racist? Well, I'll tell you. The owner of the Red Sox at the time was a man by the name of Tom Yawkey. Now, Red Sox fans, I'm talking to you here. Do you know that name? If you do, good for you, because you remember someone who the Boston Red Sox want you to forget. The Red Sox have made a very concerted effort to wipe Tom Yawkey from history. Fenway Park for over 40 years was located on Yawkey Way. It was changed back to Jersey Street in 2018. Lansdowne Station, a train station in Boston, was previously called Yorkie Way. It had been that way for over 30 years. The only thing the Red Sox haven't done is removed him from their Hall of Fame, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. That's why I'm talking about Pumpsie Green. I want to parlay it into a bigger conversation of removing part of our history. Tom Yorkie is an integral part of Red Sox history. He's the longest owner in their history by far. He owned the team from 1933 to 1976. When he bought the team, Fenway Park was a dump. The Red Sox were dreadful. There were rumblings at the time that they would move. Yorkie put a bunch of money into renovating Fenway. He hired Eddie Collins as GM. Collins scooped up a lot of talent. Granted, while Yorkie owned the Red Sox, they didn't win a World Series. They made 3 World Series. They came within a game each year of winning it. But they were never able to win a Game 7. But Tom Yorkie saved the Boston Red Sox. Without him, the Red Sox as we know it don't exist. In fact, they may not exist at all. I'm telling you, they could have moved. They could have even folded. Instead of honoring someone who was really the savior of their franchise, it wasn't Theo Epstein. Epstein saved the team from an on-the-field perspective in 2004, but in a literal sense of the term, saving the franchise, Yorkie saved it. And instead of honoring him, the Red Sox have erased him from history because, supposedly, he was a racist. The biggest evidence to support that is the fact that the Red Sox were the last Major League Baseball team to have someone break the color barrier. Like I said, Green did it in 1959. Jackie Robinson debuted for the Brooklyn Dodgers on April 15th, 1947. Robinson actually once called Yorkie, and I quote, one of the most bigoted guys in baseball. Look, I obviously never met him. Was he a racist? Possibly. I don't know. But just because he's a racist doesn't mean he shouldn't be honored for what he did. He saved the Red Sox. He literally saved them. You can't overstate his importance to the Red Sox franchise. And this is coming from a Yankee fan. This guy honestly didn't care about making money. He just cared about spending money and winning ball games. You want to call him a bad owner because in his over 40 years of owning the Red Sox, they never won a World Series. I understand the logic, but again, saving Fenway Park, pumping money into a destitute Red Sox team, being the owner of 3 teams that came within 1 win of winning a World Series. That sounds like a good owner to me. Look, there's no question that the way that minorities are treated by the police is reprehensible. And that sounds like an understatement. I've said as much on this show before. And I support the movement to hold police accountable. It's good that Black Lives Matter is drawing attention to the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and other African Americans. that have tragically died at the hands of police. But that movement has led to monuments to people like Christopher Columbus, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Andrew Jackson being vandalized. You do know that without them, you wouldn't be here, right? Without him, we don't have Jamestown, we don't have Roanoke, we don't have Plymouth Rock, we don't have anything like that. You'd still be in Europe. Without Washington, no U.S. Without Jefferson, no U.S. Without Jackson, the Civil War happened 30 years earlier. The U.S. never becomes debt-free, and we don't have Texas. Were they slaveholders? Yes. But that doesn't make them unimportant to American history. What people need to realize is that you can honor the good that these people did while also realizing that they made terrible mistakes. Let's say Yorkie was a racist. Obviously, that's a terrible mindset. Doesn't take away what he did for the Red Sox. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. Without them, we're still British subjects. Without Jackson, American history is exponentially different, and not for the better. But the Trail of Tears was still a thing. Washington and Jefferson still had slaves. Christopher Columbus, when he was governor of the Indies, was so mean to the indigenous people there, I can't even put it into words. It's disgraceful what he did to them. Tom Yorkie. Under his leadership, the Red Sox held out desegregating for a really long time. It doesn't make them totally bad people. It just means that they have a complicated legacy. That's okay. You can honor people with complicated legacies. There's no question that what people like Columbus, Washington, Jefferson, and Jackson did was wrong. No one is disputing that. But it doesn't take away their importance. They should be honored as important figures in American history, because they are. Now, having said that, I don't mind Columbus Day being renamed Indigenous Peoples Day. And I don't mind Confederate memorials being removed or renamed. I think we should honor Native Americans. We've grossly mistreated them for over 200 years. And the people that we're honoring with the Confederate memorials fired upon American citizens. They were at war with us, and we're honoring them. I think that's ridiculous. But the point I'm trying to make is, you can take the good with the bad. Just because a guy like Tom Yorkie was maybe a racist, it doesn't mean that you should erase him from history. Again, without him, the Red Sox don't exist. If you're a Red Sox fan, why wouldn't you want to honor that? Alright, it's time for another Mount Rushmore. We're on the New Jersey Devils now, a team that was really successful in the early 2000s. To start off the millennium, they were in 3 Stanley Cup finals, winning 2 of them. I spoke about the 02-03 team before because I remember that team vividly. I really liked watching them play. They were just a really good, well-rounded team. It was really fun to watch them back then. Obviously, having the best goalie in hockey history helped. If you don't think that Brodeur is the best goalie in hockey history, then you are insane. No other way to say it. You are certifiably nuts. The correct Mount Rushmore is Martin Brodeur, Patrick Elias, John McClain, and Scott Gomez. Brodeur, like I said, best goalie in hockey history. It's not Patrick Waugh, it's not Terry Sawchuk, it's not Jacques Plante, it's Brodeur. Alright, the guy revolutionized the game with the butterfly style of goaltending. He has the most wins in NHL history for a goalie, the most shutouts in NHL history, 4-time Vezina winner, 3-time Stanley Cup winner, and an incredibly nice man. I met him once in Montreal at their fan expo. Really, really nice guy. I have a bunch of stories I could tell you about that, but now's not the right time. It's nothing against Brodeur, though. Brodeur was, like I said, incredibly nice. Gem of a man. Patrick Elias is, without question, the best skater in Devils history. In addition to having the most points in Devils history, he has the most goals in Devils history and the most assists. 2-time Stanley Cup winner there, 4-time All-Star, 4-time point-a-game player. One thing that I was thinking about while I was doing this, was Elias ever a star? Like, back then, did you ever think that Patrick Elias was one of the best players in hockey? I'm not trying to take anything away from Elias. Great career. Future Hall of Famer. But was he ever great? I mean, there's no shame if he wasn't. He was the best skater on 2 Stanley Cup winning teams. But if you go back in time and really think about it, did you ever say to yourself, Patrick Elias is one of the 10 best players in the NHL? I'll tell ya, I never did. Just an interesting piece to his legacy, not trying to take anything away from him, it was just something I thought about. Really gentlemanly player, really good defensively, played the game the right way. Like I said, I'm really not trying to take anything away from him. Best skater in Devils history by far. It's not even close. John McClain, throughout most of his Devils career, was the best player on the team. Second best skater and third best player on the 95 Stanley Cup winning Devils. Younger Devils fans will just remember him as a failed coach. And I understand that. He was absolutely terrible as coach of the Devils. But don't let that take too much away from his Devils legacy. He has the second most points in Devils history. And the second most goals in Devils history. McClain has an easy spot on this Mount Rushmore. Scott Gomez was kind of tough for the last spot. I thought about giving it to Kirk Muller. I thought about giving it to Travis Zajac. But I went with Gomez because when I really thought about it, and I really dig deep into it, He was the third best player on the 2000 and 2003 Stanley Cup winning Devils, and that's despite the fact that 2000 was his rookie year. He won the Calder Trophy that year, scoring 70 points. Like I said, it was kind of a tough decision between Muller, Zajac, and Gomez. If I didn't dig deep into it, I probably would have gone with Muller, because he's more dominant than Zajac. But when I really looked into it, Gomez deserves the final spot. Tomorrow, you're going to get an interview that I'm going to do with Derek Barnes. He wrote a really fun book about baseball that's easy to understand. If you're not a big baseball fan, you can read it and learn some interesting stories. I know I'm going to have a really good time talking to him. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that Babe Ruth wasn't born. He fell from a tree.